He came home with a smile and a bouquet of her favorite white roses, ready to say sorry for all the missed dinners and lonely nights. Thanksgiving smelled like pumpkin pie and second chances. But the second he pushed open the bedroom door, the roses fell from his hand, one by one, like slow red tears on the floor. His beautiful wife was not alone. And in that single heartbeat, everything he had built, everything he thought was love, shattered louder than any scream. This is the true story of a young billionaire who learned that some knives are kissed before they cut you. A story of quiet heartbreak, cold revenge, and the kind of healing that only comes after everything burns. If you've ever been betrayed, lied to, or loved someone who never really loved you back, don't look away now. This one is going to hurt in all the right ways. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single part of the story. And please, drop a comment right now and tell us, where in the world are you watching this from tonight? Let's carry this story together. The private jet touched down at Murtala Muhammed International Airport in Lagos just as the sun was turning orange over the city. Alexander Ease, 29 years old and already one of the youngest billionaires in Nigeria, stepped onto the tarmac with a small smile he could not hide. He had cancelled 3 important meetings in Dubai just to be home for Thanksgiving. For the first time in 4 months he had no driver, no bodyguard, no assistant, only a quiet Uber and a bouquet of white roses wrapped in brown paper resting on the seat beside him. Victoria loved white roses. She said they looked expensive and innocent at the same time. He remembered the first time he brought her some, 2 weeks after they met at a friend's birthday party in Lekki. She had kissed him so hard that night that his lips were swollen the next morning. Tonight he wanted that kiss again. He wanted to walk into the house on Banana Island, lift her off the ground, and tell her he was sorry for all the weeks he spent chasing money instead of chasing her. The driver kept looking at him in the mirror, probably wondering why a man wearing a simple native shirt and wristwatch that cost more than the car was smiling at flowers like a small boy. Alexander did not care. In his head he could already see Victoria's face when she opened the door, those big eyes that made him stupid, that red lipstick she wore even when she was only going to the spa. He told the driver to take the 3rd mainland bridge slow. He wanted the night to stretch. The Uber stopped in front of the big white gate at 8:17 p.m. The security men jumped up when they saw him. They were not expecting him until next week. Alexander greeted them in Igbo, asked about their children, gave them small money for Thanksgiving chicken, and told them not to announce him. He wanted to surprise his wife. He walked through the compound carrying only the roses and a small bag. The house was too quiet. No music, no smell of turkey or pepper soup coming from the kitchen like he expected. The dining table was already set for 2, candles waiting, plates shining under the chandelier Victoria insisted must come from Italy. But the food was still in the warming drawer, untouched. He felt a small worry crawl into his chest, but he pushed it away. Maybe she went out with her friends and was rushing back. Maybe she was upstairs taking a nap. He climbed the stairs slowly, the roses brushing against his leg with every step. The bedroom door was closed. From behind it came a low laugh, Victoria's laugh, the one that used to feel like warm honey in his ears. His heart jumped with joy. She was home. He balanced the flowers in one hand, turned the handle gently, and pushed the door open with a smile already forming on his lips, ready to say the words he had practiced on the plane. "Baby, I'm home for good this time." It was 7 years ago, a hot Saturday night in Lekki Phase 1, when Alexander first saw Victoria under the colored lights of Tega's rooftop birthday party. He had come straight from Abuja, still dusty from supervising a new tower site, wearing a plain white shirt and jeans while everyone else dripped in designers. He was 22, already rich from selling his first tech startup, but he felt small among all the loud children of oil money and politicians. Then Victoria walked past him carrying 2 glasses of champagne, her gold dress hugging every line of her body, her braids falling like black water down her back. She looked at him once and laughed at something her friend whispered, and that laugh went straight into his stomach like a fist made of sugar. He did not know how to talk to girls like her. His mother had raised him in a quiet flat in Surulere, teaching him that money should be silent and kindness loud. But that night he forgot every lesson. He followed the sound of her voice across the roof, stood too close while pretending to look for a drink, and when she finally turned and asked, "Are you lost?" he answered. Yes, since the day I was born, until now. It sounded stupid in his head, but she smiled with those perfect teeth and said, then let me help you find your way. They talked until the music stopped, until the staff started stacking chairs. She told him her father owned half the hotels in Abuja, that she had never failed at anything she wanted, that she hated boring people. He told her he hated pretending, that he still took Danfo to the mainland sometimes just to remember who he was. By sunrise they were sitting on the warm bonnet of his old Toyota, sharing one cold bottle of Coke, her shoes in his lap because her feet hurt. When he dropped her at her parents' mansion in Ikoyi, she kissed him slow and deep, tasting like champagne and danger, and whispered against his mouth, "Don't fall in love with me, Alex. I will ruin you." He laughed and said it was too late. For the next 6 months he lived inside that kiss. He flew to Paris just because she said she missed croissants. He bought her the latest iPhone the day it came out, even though his own phone still had a cracked screen. Every time he visited her parents' house, her mother looked at him like he was a delivery boy who had wandered into the wrong gate, and her father asked loud questions about how exactly Alexander made his money. Victoria only laughed and pulled him closer, painting her name across his chest with red nails. She never asked him to change, because he was already changing on his own, wearing better clothes, speaking softer, learning which fork to use first. His own mother watched from Surulere with worried eyes every time he came home smelling of Victoria's perfume. "That girl shines too bright, my son," she said once, holding his face in her rough palms. "Bright things burn." But Alexander was too far inside the fire to feel the heat. On the night he proposed, under strings of fairy lights he paid electricians to hang all over the empty plot where he would later build their Banana Island house, Victoria cried pretty tears and said yes before he even finished the question. She kissed him in front of 200 guests while cameras flashed, and for one perfect minute he believed love could be easy, that a boy from Surulere and a princess from Ikoyi could write their own ending. He believed it so hard that he almost didn't hear the tiny voice in his heart asking why her yes sounded more like victory than surrender. 3 weeks before the wedding, Alexander drove his mother to the small clinic in Surulere because her knees were hurting again. While the nurse took her blood pressure, he sat outside on the wooden bench under the neem tree and called Victoria to remind her about the cake tasting. She laughed loud into the phone and said, "Baby, send the baker to the house, I'm too tired to be driving up and down Lagos because of sugar." When he told her his mother wanted to meet her properly before the big day, just the three of them, no cameras or friends, Victoria went quiet for a second, then said, "Alex, I have a spa appointment in Dubai that week, and Mummy already paid. Your mother will see me plenty after the wedding." He swallowed the disappointment and said it was fine. That same evening he carried his mother's drugs home in a small nylon bag and found her sitting on the plastic chair by the door, fanning herself with an old newspaper. She looked at him for a long time without speaking, the way only mothers can look, until he sat on the floor in front of her like he did when he was 10. Then she touched his hair and said, "My son, I have watched that girl since the day you brought her here. She walked into my parlor like she was doing me a favor by stepping on my old rug. When I offered her water, she asked if it was bottled. When I cooked egusi for her, she pushed it away and said she doesn't eat soup with oil floating on top." Alexander tried to laugh it off, said Victoria was just used to a different life, but his mother held his chin and made him look straight into her tired eyes. "A woman who cannot drink water from your mother's cup will never drink from your pain when life gets hard. She will only drink your money and your time until nothing is left." That night he could not sleep. He lay on the small bed in his old room, listening to the neighbor's generator coughing outside, and remembered every warning his mother had whispered over the years. How Victoria rolled her eyes when he spoke Igbo on the phone, how she called his childhood friends those village boys, how she once threw away the Ankara shirt his mother sewed for him because it looked local. But every time doubt crawled into his chest, he remembered her smile, the way she danced only for him at parties, the way she called him my king when she wanted something expensive. He told himself love was not perfect, that every marriage had rough edges, that his mother was old school and didn't understand modern girls. The next morning he went to her kitchen while she was pounding yam and knelt down like a small boy. "Mummy, I love her," he said, voice shaking. "Please be happy for me." His mother stopped pounding, the pestle heavy in her hand, and tears fell from her eyes onto the mortar. She did not say yes and she did not say no. She only pulled him into her wrapper that smelled of onions and firewood and held him so tight he felt her heart beating against his cheek. "Alexander," she whispered into his hair, "if she ever breaks you, remember this house is still yours. Remember I warned you with love, not with anger." He cried quietly into her wrapper like he was 10 again, and when he left for Victoria's house that afternoon, he carried his mother's fear in one pocket and Victoria's love in the other, never knowing which one was heavier. The wedding day came like Lagos Hamatan, dry, expensive, and impossible to breathe through quietly. Victoria's parents turned the Eco Hotel Convention Center into something that looked more like Dubai than Nigeria, crystal curtains hanging from the ceiling, fresh orchids flown in from Thailand, a 10-tier cake taller than the flower girls. Alexander stood at the entrance in his white agbada stitched with gold thread and felt like a stranger in his own life. His mother sat in the front row wearing the same blue wrapper she wore to his university graduation, clutching a small handbag and smiling only when he looked at her. Victoria arrived 25 minutes late, on purpose, everyone whispered, stepping out of a white Rolls-Royce in a dress that left her whole back open to the waist, diamonds dripping from her neck like water. When she reached him at the altar and the pastor asked if anyone had reason they should not marry, Alexander felt his mother's eyes burning the back of his neck, but he only looked at Victoria's red lips and said "I do" before the question even finished. Victoria's father paid for everything: the Burna Boy performance, the fireworks that spelled their names in the sky, the private jet that carried half the guests to Dubai for the honeymoon he never asked for. At the reception, Victoria danced so hard her friends had to hold her dress, laughing and shouting that she had caught the biggest fish in Lagos. Alexander danced too, but slower, watching his mother sit alone at her table while Victoria's cousins took selfies and stepped over her feet without apology. When it was time to cut the cake, Victoria grabbed the knife first and smeared cream on his nose for the cameras, then turned to kiss him so the photographers could catch the perfect shot. He tasted sugar and champagne and something cold underneath. That night, in the presidential suite overlooking the Atlantic, Victoria kicked off her shoes and lay on the bed counting the wedding gifts on her phone. "Daddy said the Lekki land is already in my name," she said, scrolling, "and Mummy transferred 10 million for my shopping in Paris next month." Alexander sat on the edge of the bed still wearing his gold cap, feeling the weight of the day pressing his shoulders down. He reached for her hand and said, "Baby, did you see my mother at all today? She waited the whole night to hug you." Victoria looked up, surprised, like he had spoken in another language. "Alex, please, today was about us. I can't be running after one old woman in wrapper when I have 500 guests. She's your mother, you people do all that family thing." She rolled over, already texting her friends about the yacht party tomorrow. Alexander stared at the ceiling where shadows from the ocean lights danced, and for the first time since he met her, the room felt too big and too empty even with 2 people inside it. He thought about his mother taking bus from Surulere to 6 just to watch him promise forever to a girl who called her one old woman, and something small cracked inside his chest. But Victoria turned, crawled across the bed, kissed his neck, whispered, "You're mine now, billionaire," and the crack closed again, or maybe he only pretended it did. Outside, the Atlantic kept crashing against the hotel walls, loud and careless, the way love crashes when it is young and blind and dressed in diamonds. The first year moved fast on the outside and slow on the inside. Alexander's company opened 3 new towers in Abuja and signed a deal that put his name on the cover of Forbes Africa, so the house on Banana Island filled with bigger televisions, Italian marble, and housekeepers who spoke only when spoken to. Victoria filled her days with brunches at Sky Restaurant, shopping trips to Dubai every 6 weeks, and posting pictures with captions like Queen of Lagos. In the evenings she waited for him on the long sofa, legs folded under her, phone in hand, and the moment he walked in she would stretch out one arm and say, "Baby, come and carry your stress," but by the time he reached her she was already scrolling again. Small fights started like Hamatan cracks in the ground. She wanted a new G-Wagon because the old one was last season. He told her the old one was only 8 months. She wanted to fly first class to London just for a hair appointment. He asked why she couldn't use the salon in Lagos that charged 2 million naira for braids. Every time he said no, her face changed, eyes getting small and sharp, voice going high like a child who never heard the word before. "Do you know who my father is?" she would hiss, and he would feel shame crawl up his neck because he had promised himself he would never make her beg. So he signed the check, transferred the money, watched her smile come back bright and quick, and told himself this was how rich husbands kept peace. At night she slept far on her side of the king-size bed, back turned, while he stared at the ceiling fan spinning like his own thoughts. Sometimes he reached for her in the dark and she let him, but it felt like borrowing something that was never really his. Weekends were the hardest. Alexander wanted to drive to Surulere to eat his mother's bitterleaf soup and listen to her radio playing gospel, but Victoria always had plans: boat cruise, polo match, birthday party in a mansion bigger than theirs. When he insisted on visiting his mother alone, Victoria would roll her eyes and say again, "That woman is turning you into a mummy's boy." Once he came home and found her throwing away the small wooden stool his mother gave them as wedding gift, saying it looked like village furniture and scratched the marble. He picked it up from the dustbin himself, carried it to his study, and locked the door. That night they fought loud enough for the cooks to hear. She called him stingy, said he embarrassed her in front of her friends because he still sent monthly money to his village cousins. He asked her when last she even called her own mother without asking for something. She threw her new iPhone at the wall, screen cracking like a gunshot, and screamed that he married her to control her, not to love her. They did not speak for 4 days. On the 5th day she walked into his office wearing only his white shirt, knelt between his legs under the desk, and did things with her mouth that made him forget his own name. When it was over she looked up with wet eyes and said, "See, I can be good if you let me." He pulled her up, kissed her forehead, and transferred 50 million naira to her account before she even reached the door. The wooden stool stayed in the study, gathering dust, and the crack in his chest grew a little wider, but he painted a smile over it every morning because love, he told himself, was work, and he was willing to work harder than anyone. The call came on a Tuesday morning when Alexander was in a glass meeting room overlooking the Lagos Lagoon, signing papers that would make him another 2 billion naira. His mother's neighbor, Auntie Ngozi, was crying so hard he could barely hear the words, "Your mummy collapsed in the market. They have carried her to come on, my son." He left the pen on the table, told his assistant to cancel everything, and drove himself through Lagos traffic, horn blaring, heart louder than the engine. When he reached the general ward, the smell of Dettol and fear hit him like a slap. His mother lay on a narrow bed with green sheets, eyes closed, oxygen tube under her nose, her small body looking even smaller under the thin blanket. The doctor said high blood pressure, small stroke, she would live but needed rest and medicine that cost more than her pension every month. Alexander sat on the plastic chair beside her bed for 6 hours straight, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall. When she finally opened her eyes and saw him, she smiled like he was still 10 years old and said, "My husband, you came." He kissed her forehead and promised she would never sleep again in that ward. He moved her to the best private hospital in Ikoyi that same night, paid for the VIP room, hired a nurse who spoke Igbo. Every day for 2 weeks he left the office at 4 p.m., fought Third Mainland Bridge traffic, and sat by her bed reading her Bible stories aloud while she dozed. He brought her bitterleaf soup in small flasks, fed her with his own hand when her right side was too weak. She kept saying, "Thank you, my son," until the words became a song between them. He called Victoria every evening from the hospital corridor. The first 3 days she picked up, asked quick questions, said "send my regards" and hung up. On the 4th day her phone rang out. On the 7th day he sent a text, "Mummy is asking of you, even 5 minutes will make her happy." She replied with one word, "busy." He stared at the screen for a long time, then put the phone away and went back to hold his mother's hand. One night the nurse stepped out to buy recharge card and his mother opened her eyes clear and strong. She looked at him and said, "Where is your wife, Alexander?" He started to lie, to say traffic or headache, but she squeezed his fingers and shook her head. "Don't cover for her. I know. A woman who cannot leave her bed to come and greet the woman who carried you for 9 months will leave your bed the day somebody carries her with sweeter words." Tears filled his eyes but he only kissed her knuckles and said, "You just get better, Mummy, that is all I want." She closed her eyes again, tired, but he felt the truth settle heavy on his chest like Lagos rain on a zinc roof. When he finally drove home at 11 p.m., the Banana Island house was blazing with lights and music, Victoria's friends were in the pool, drinking expensive champagne, shouting, "Turn it up." She was in the middle in a red bikini, dancing on the marble edge, laughing the same laugh he fell in love with 7 years ago. When she saw him standing there in yesterday's shirt, smelling of hospital, she waved like he was just another guest and shouted, "Babe, come join us, it's girls' night." He turned, walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and for the first time since the wedding night, he locked it from the inside. After his mother came home from the hospital, Alexander started living 2 lives inside one body. From Monday to Friday he wore sharp suits, flew to Abuja or Port Harcourt, shook hands with governors, smiled for cameras, and signed deals that added more zeros to his bank account than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Then every evening, no matter how late, he drove himself to Surulere, parked the big Jeep 2 streets away so the neighbors wouldn't talk too much, and climbed the narrow stairs to his mother's flat carrying takeaway jollof or fruits from the island. He sat on the small balcony with her, drinking Gary and groundnut while she told him stories about his father who died when he was 6. The more time he spent there, the smaller the banana island house began to feel, like a beautiful cage made of marble and glass. At home Victoria moved through the rooms like a bright bird that had forgotten how to sing to him. She still kissed him when she wanted new bags or a trip to Cape Town with her friends, but the kisses tasted like business now. Some nights he came back and found her asleep on the long sofa with her phone on her chest, chat open to someone whose name was saved as Thames Baby. He never opened the chat, he only carried her to bed, pulled the silk blanket over her shoulders, and went to sleep in the guest room because lying beside her felt lonelier than lying alone. Work became his warm blanket. When the pain in his chest started climbing into his throat, he booked another meeting, accepted another interview, flew to another city. Money kept coming in, loud and fast, drowning out the quiet voice that kept asking, "Is this still love?" By the time his mother could walk to church again without a stick, Alexander had stopped trying to fix things with Victoria. He no longer asked where she was going at night in dresses that cost more than some people's rent. He no longer checked her phone or asked why the driver sometimes brought her home at 4 a.m. smelling of club smoke and another man's perfume. He just worked. He bought a new office tower on Victoria Island and named it after his mother quietly, without telling anyone. He started a small foundation that paid school fees for children in Surulere, and every Saturday he drove there himself to hand over the checks so he could see the mothers cry and hug him. Victoria laughed when she heard. "So now you're playing Father Christmas for village people while your wife wears last season Birkin?" He only smiled and said nothing. Inside, the crack that started on their wedding night had become a wide, dark river. He could still see Victoria's beauty, could still remember the girl on the bonnet of his old Toyota sharing warm Coke, but that girl felt like a photograph fading on a wall. Some mornings he woke up early, stood on the bedroom balcony watching the sun rise over the water, and felt nothing when her arm slipped around his waist from behind. He began to say "I love you" only when she said it first, and even then the words came out like borrowed clothes that no longer fit. Work was the only place he still felt strong. So he buried himself deeper, flew farther, stayed longer, because if he stopped moving he would have to sit still and listen to the sound of his marriage dying one quiet breath at a time. Thanksgiving mornings smelled like rain that had not yet decided to fall. Alexander woke up in a hotel suite in Dubai, the kind of room that cost more per night than his mother's entire street paid in rent for a year. He had been there for 12 days closing a deal with some Arab princes who liked to talk business between shisha puffs and gold-plated desserts. The night before, they finally shook hands at 3 a.m., and his lawyer sent the congratulatory text with so many zeros that even Alexander had to read it twice. He should have felt on top of the world, but when he opened the curtains and saw the desert sun burning the city gold, all he felt was empty. His phone showed 1 missed call from his mother and 37 WhatsApp messages from Victoria, mostly shopping receipts and 1 selfie of her pouting in a private jet bathroom mirror with the caption "Missing my king." He stared at the picture for a long time, trying to remember when last she called him that without wanting something. Then he opened his mother's voice note instead. Her voice was soft, a little tired, saying only, "My son, this house is too quiet without you. Even the walls are asking when you will come home and eat turkey with your old woman." Something inside him broke open like a small boy's fist unclenching. He called his pilot, cancelled the celebration dinner, cancelled the shopping spree his partners had planned, and told them he was going home to Nigeria that same morning. While the jet was being prepared, he walked into the hotel flower shop and chose the biggest bunch of white roses they had, the kind Victoria used to say made her feel like a bride again. He paid without looking at the price, held the flowers on his lap all the way to the airport, and for the first time in years felt light, like a man running towards something instead of away. The flight took 7 hours, but his heart landed in Lagos long before the wheels touched ground. He kept picturing his mother's face when he walked into her parlor unannounced, kept picturing Victoria's scream of happy shock when he lifted her off the floor in their marble hallway. He rehearsed the apology in his head 100 times. "Baby, I have been a ghost in my own house. From today I choose us." He even smiled at the air hostess when she offered him champagne because today felt like the first day of a new marriage. Over the Atlantic he slept for 2 hours and dreamed of the old Toyota bonnet, of warm Coke and Victoria's feet in his lap. When he woke up, Nigeria was beneath him, green and brown and alive. He turned off airplane mode and ignored all the business messages, only sent one text to Victoria, "Guess who's coming home early to eat turkey with his queen?" with a heart emoji he hadn't used in 2 years. She never replied, but he didn't mind, he wanted to see her face when he walked through the door instead. At Murtala Muhammad the air smelled of fuel and rain and harmattan dust, and he breathed it in like medicine. He told the driver to take the longest route, past the markets closing for the day, past children playing football barefoot, past women carrying basins of oranges on their heads. He rolled the window down and let the Lagos noise fill the car, let it wash away the quiet Dubai nights. The white roses rested on the seat beside him, already opening their faces to the warm air, and Alexander smiled at them like they were old friends who knew exactly where they were going. The Uber rolled through the quiet streets of Banana Island at a few minutes past 8. Most of the big houses were already glowing with early Christmas lights, even though Thanksgiving had not yet finished, but number 47 stood darker than Alexander expected. Only the small garden lights along the driveway were on, painting soft yellow circles on the wet grass. The driver stopped at the gate and Alexander stepped out alone, the white roses cool against his chest. He told the security men to keep quiet, pressed 2 crisp 50,000 naira notes into each of their palms, and watched their faces light up with surprise and promises of silence. He walked up the long driveway himself, shoes silent on the interlocked stones, breathing in the smell of cut grass and sea air that came from the water behind the house. The front door was unlocked, something Victoria always scolded the maids about, and when he pushed it open the big hallway swallowed him in cool darkness. No aroma of turkey or stuffing floated out to meet him. No sound of television or high-life music she sometimes played when she cooked. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the faint ticking of the Italian wall clock she loved because it cost more than a car. Alexander stood there for a long moment holding the flowers, listening to the house breathe. The dining table he could see through the archway was set for 2, white plates, gold-rimmed glasses, tall candles waiting in crystal holders, everything perfect and untouched, like a picture from a magazine nobody lived in. He felt the first small needle of worry in his stomach, but he smiled it away. Maybe she fell asleep upstairs after cooking. Maybe she was in the shower singing off-key to Burna Boy the way she did when she thought nobody was listening. He laid his small travel bag gently by the door, kept the roses in his hand, and started climbing the wide marble stairs one slow step at a time, heart beating louder than his feet. Halfway up he stopped because the house was not completely silent after all. There was a sound, soft and far away, coming from the direction of their bedroom at the end of the corridor. A low laugh, Victoria's laugh, the one that used to make him weak 7 years ago on a rooftop in Lekki. It floated down the hallway wrapped in something warmer, something that sounded like skin against skin and breath-catching. Alexander's smile froze on his face. He told himself it was the television, maybe she was watching one of those Nollywood films she loved, but the laugh came again, closer now, and this time it was followed by a man's voice, deep and lazy, saying words he could not yet make out. The roses suddenly felt heavy, like someone had filled the stems with stones. He kept climbing anyway, slower than before, each step taking longer than the last, the way a man walks toward a door he already knows will hurt him. The corridor was darker than the stairs, lit only by 2 small wall lamps that threw gold on the family portraits Victoria insisted must be changed every year because we can't look old in our own house. He passed the framed photo from their wedding, her smile bright and sharp, his own eyes already unsure even then. The bedroom door was closed but not locked, a thin strip of warm light leaking from underneath like a secret trying to escape. The laugh came again, louder, mixed with a soft moan that belonged only to nights when the world was supposed to be just the two of them. Alexander stood in front of the door holding white roses that had started to tremble in his hands, and for one long second he thought about turning around, going back down the stairs, getting into the car, and flying anywhere the sky would still take him. But his feet would not move backward. They only knew how to love forward, even when love was about to cut him open. Alexander's fingers closed tighter around the stems of the white roses until a thorn found skin and pushed a small bead of blood into his palm. He felt the sting, welcomed it, because it was cleaner than whatever waited on the other side of the door. The bedroom was spilling sounds now, the slow creak of the big bed he had shipped from Italy, the soft slap of bodies finding rhythm, Victoria's breath catching high in her throat the way it used to catch only for him. Each noise landed on his chest like a stone dropped into still water, sending rings of pain wider and wider. He stood there longer than any man should, listening, letting the truth pour into his ears because some part of him still needed to be sure. The man's voice came again, low and laughing, saying her name the way lovers do when they have said it 1,000 times in secret, "Vicky, slow, you'll kill me," and Victoria answered with a breathless giggle that sounded drunk on pleasure. Alexander recognized the tone. She used it the first night they ever spent together, when she whispered against his neck that he was ruining her for every other man. The roses shook harder in his hand. He looked down at them, at the perfect white petals now stained with one red drop sliding from his thumb, and something inside him went very quiet, like the moment before Lagos rain finally falls and the whole city holds its breath. He reached for the handle with the slowness of a man turning the last page of a book he already knows ends badly. The door opened without a sound. He had oiled the hinges himself only last year because Victoria hated any noise that was not music or money. Warm light from the bedside lamps poured over him, gold and cruel. The room smelled of her perfume, the one he still flew to Paris to buy because the Lagos shops never had the exact bottle, mixed now with sweat and something sharper that belonged to another man. Victoria was on her back across their white sheets, hair wild on the pillow, legs wrapped high around a naked waist that was not his. The man moved above her, skin shining, mouth on her neck, and she had her eyes closed, lips parted, making small greedy sounds that used to be Alexander's private song. Time did not stop, it simply stretched, thin and terrible. He saw everything at once, her red nails digging into the man's back the same way they once dug into his own, the wedding ring still on her finger catching the light with every push, the second champagne glass on the nightstand that was not meant for him. The roses slipped from his hand and hit the marble floor with a soft thud, petals scattering like snow that had forgotten how to be pure. Victoria's eyes flew open. For one heartbeat the room held only the sound of skin and breath and a billionaire's heart finally breaking out loud. The man on top of her noticed first. His head turned slow, like someone waking from a good dream, and when his eyes met Alexander standing in the doorway, his body froze mid-motion. He was young, light-skinned, beard trimmed sharp, the kind of face that appeared in music videos and on Victoria's phone too often. For one long second nobody breathed. Then the man scrambled backward, almost falling off the bed, grabbing at the sheet to cover himself while muttering "Jesus, Jesus" under his breath like a small boy caught stealing meat. Victoria pushed herself up on her elbows, hair sticking to her sweaty forehead, and the sheet slipped down to her waist before she snatched it back. Her eyes, those big eyes Alexander once called home, went wide with shock, then narrow with something colder. She did not scream. She did not cry. She only stared at him across the scattered white roses on the floor, chest rising and falling fast, lips swollen from another man's mouth. Alexander felt the air leave his body in one slow leak, as if someone had opened a valve behind his ribs. The pain was not sharp like he expected, it was heavy, dull, ancient, like carrying his mother's coffin before she was even dead. He looked at the bed, at the dent in his pillow where another head had rested, at Victoria's red lace panties hanging off the lampshade like a flag of surrender he never asked for. The room smelled thick, used, and he wondered how many times this had happened while he was busy buying the world for her. Victoria found her voice first. She sat up straighter, clutching the sheet to her chest like armor, and the beautiful face he had loved for 7 years twisted into something ugly and proud. "So now you know how to come home early," she spat, voice shaking but loud, as if anger could cover naked skin. The man tried to speak, started, "Babe, I swear," but she cut him with one raised hand without looking away from Alexander. "Shut up, Temmie." Alexander heard the name like a slap. Temmie. The same Temmie who used to call him bros at parties, who drank his champagne and once asked for a small loan to start an app. Alexander's legs felt rooted to the marble. He wanted to shout, to throw something, to drag the boy out by his neck, but his body would not move. All the words he had prepared on the plane, all the sorries and promises and "I love yous," dried up in his mouth and turned to dust. Victoria kept talking, faster now, voice climbing higher. "You think you can just appear like this after months of treating me like a side chick in my own marriage? Do you know how many nights I slept alone in this big bed while you were chasing billions that don't keep anybody warm?" She laughed, short and bitter. "Happy Thanksgiving, Alex. Welcome home." The roses lay bleeding petals between them, and Alexander looked at his wife, really looked, and saw a stranger wearing the face of the girl he once shared warm Coke with on an old Toyota bonnet. Part 2 of this amazing story drops very soon. If you leave now, you will never forgive yourself for not knowing what Alexander does next, because some pain doesn't make you cry, it makes you dangerous. Hit subscribe right now. Don't let this story live without you. And tell me in the comments, real quick, no long talk. When someone breaks you this badly, do you break them back, or do you disappear and become someone they will never recognize again? I will be reading every single comment.